When night janitor Raymond Martinez accidentally shattered the CEO's prized crystal award, he risked everything by attempting to repair it himself instead of reporting the damage. The next morning, Victoria Chen stared at the nearly invisible repair and realized the man who emptied her trash might be the engineering genius her company desperately needed. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Raymond Martinez kept his head down as he pushed his cleaning cart through the executive floor of Meridian Technologies. The polished marble floors reflected the soft glow of recessed lighting, making the already imposing space feel like a cathedral of commerce, a place where people like him were meant to be invisible. It was well past 9 in the evening. The executives had long since departed in their luxury vehicles, leaving behind coffee cups with lipstick stains, crumpled meeting notes, and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. Raymond preferred the building this wake, quiet, empty, his domain for the next 6 hours. He'd been at Meridian for almost 3 years now. The night shift suited him perfectly. It meant he could see his daughter Lily off to school in the morning and be home when she returned in the afternoon. The 8 hours of sleep he managed between shifts were a small sacrifice for being present in her life. Raymond moved methodically through the offices, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces. The routine was soothing, allowing his mind to wander. Tonight he was preoccupied with Lily's upcoming science fair. She'd been working tirelessly on her project about renewable energy, and the excitement in her eyes when she talked about it was worth every exhausted moment of his double life as father and night janitor. When he reached the corner office belonging to CEO Victoria Chen, he paused. The lights were still on, which was unusual. Chen was known for her militant adherence to energy conservation despite the company's vast resources. Raymond hesitated before knocking softly on the frosted glass door. No response. He entered cautiously, cartwheels squeaking against the immaculate floor. The office was empty, but evidence of a hasty departure remained. Drawers left partially open, a designer jacket draped over a chair, and a half-empty cup of tea on the desk. Raymond set about his usual tasks, careful not to disturb anything on Ms. Chen's meticulously organized desk. As he reached to empty the small trash bin beside it, his elbow brushed against something on the edge. Before he could react, a crystal award toppled off the desk and shattered on the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire empty building. His heart stopped. The award lay in pieces, the crystal fractured into a dozen jagged shards. Raymond recognized it immediately. The Women in Technology Leadership Award that Ms. Chen had received just last week. The ceremony had been covered extensively in the business press, and the company had sent out a company-wide email celebrating her achievement. It was, without question, irreplaceable. Raymond knelt down, carefully gathering the pieces. The central crystal column had broken cleanly near the base, and the engraved nameplate was thankfully intact. He collected every fragment, wrapping them in a clean microfiber cloth from his cart. His mind raced with possible solutions. He couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Lily's medical bills and their rent already stretching his modest income to the breaking point. He made a decision. Instead of reporting the accident, he would fix it himself. Raymond had always been good with his hands. Before life had taken its unexpected turns, he'd been studying engineering, dreaming of designing renewable energy system. Those plans had been shelved when Lily's mother died, leaving him as the sole provider for their infant daughter. But the skills remained, dormant but not forgotten. He tucked the wrapped award fragments into his uniform pocket and finished cleaning the office, taking extra care to remove any tiny crystal splinters from the floor. No one would know what had happened, at least not until he could attempt to repair the damage. The following night, Raymond arrived at work with a small kit of tools and adhesives concealed in his lunch bag. He'd spent his precious few hours of sleep researching crystal repair techniques and had stopped at a craft store on his way to work, spending money he couldn't really spare on specialized epoxy that dried clear. He set up a makeshift workshop in the maintenance closet during his lunch break, using a desk lamp for better light as he meticulously aligned the crystal fragments. The break was clean enough that with the right adhesive, the repair might be nearly invisible. His fingers, calloused from years of manual labor, worked with surprising delicacy as he applied tiny amounts of the epoxy to each connecting surface. An hour later, the award was whole again. The repair wasn't perfect. A hairline fracture was still visible if you looked closely, but from a normal viewing distance, it appeared intact. Raymond carefully placed it in a secure spot on his cart, planning to return it to Ms. Chen's office during his shift. He was polishing Ms. Chen's desk when the office door suddenly opened. He froze, the award still in his hand. Victoria Chen stood in the doorway, her expression shifting from surprise to suspicion as she took in the scene. Janitor handling her prestigious award. She was smaller in person than she appeared during company presentations, but her presence filled the room with an undeniable authority. "What are you doing with that?" Her voice was cool and precise, the tone of someone accustomed to immediate explanation. Raymond's mouth went dry. I was just polishing it, ma'am." Victoria stepped closer, her eyes narrowing as she extended her hand. "Let me see it." Reluctantly, Raymond handed over the award. His heart hammered in his chest as she examined it, turning it over in her manicured hands. Would she notice the repair? Would she fire him on the spot? "This was broken," she said flatly, her finger tracing the nearly invisible line where he joined the pieces. It wasn't a question. Raymond swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. I accidentally knocked it off your desk last night. I'm very sorry. And you fixed it, she continued, still studying the crystal surface. I tried to, yes. I know how important it is. Victoria looked up from the award, her gaze assessing him with new interest. Most people would have reported it broken or simply hidden it away. I couldn't do that, Raymond replied honestly. It wouldn't have been right. Victoria placed the award back on her desk, her expression unreadable. What's your name? Raymond Martinez, ma'am. She nodded slowly. Well, Raymond Martinez. Your honesty is noted, but I'm curious. This is a professional repair job. Where did you learn to do this? I used to study engineering. Before ... single quotes he trailed off, not wanting to burden her with his personal history. Before? She prompted. Life happened. He finished simply. I have a daughter to support. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Recognition, perhaps her unexpected empathy. I see. Thank you for fixing it. Not many people would have taken the initiative. Raymond nodded, relief washing over him. Is there anything else you need, ma'am? I should continue with my rounds. No, that will be all. She turned toward her computer, then paused. Actually, what was your name again? Raymond Martinez? Victoria nodded, making a mental note. Good night, Mr. Martinez. Good night, Miss Chen. As Raymond pushed his cart out of the office, he didn't notice Victoria watching him with a thoughtful expression, her fingers still tracing the repaired seam of the award door that she was already typing his name into the company database. What he didn't know was that this small act of integrity had set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The following morning, Victoria arrived at her office earlier than usual. The encounter with the janitor Raymond Martinez had stayed with her throughout the night. There was something about the man's quiet dignity and unexpected skill that had caught her attention. In her 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, she'd learned to recognize untapped potential, and Raymond had triggered that instinct. She pulled up his employee file on her computer. His employment history was sparse. 3 years at Meridian Technologies, preceded by a string of service jobs with gaps in between. But what interested her was his partial educational record. 2 years at California Polytechnic on an engineering scholarship before an abrupt withdrawal. No reason was listed. Victoria leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingernails thoughtfully against the crystal award on her desk. The repair was remarkably well done. If she hadn't caught him in the act, she might never have noticed the hairline fracture where the pieces had been joined. Her assistant knocked and entered with her morning coffee. The quarterly projections are ready for your review, and HR sent up the candidates for the new technical supervisor position. Thank you, Claire. Has anyone applied internally for that position? Just the usual suspects from middle management. No one particularly exciting. Victoria nodded absently, her mind still on Raymond Martinez. I'd like you to add one more candidate to the list. He's currently in our maintenance department. Claire raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question her boss's instructions. Of course. Name? Raymond Martinez, and I want his application fast-tracked. Schedule an interview for tomorrow afternoon. After Claire left, Victoria examined the award once more. The Women in Technology Leadership Award was more than just crystal and metal. It represented her journey from coding in her parents' garage to leading one of the most innovative tech companies in the country. The fact that Raymond had understood its importance enough to repair it rather than simply apologize for breaking it spoke volumes about his character. Her morning was consumed with back-to-back meetings. But during a brief break, she made her way down to the maintenance department on the basement level of the building. The supervisor, a heavy-set man named Frank, seemed surprised to see her in his cluttered office. Miss Chen, this is unexpected. Is there an issue with the cleaning services? Not at all, Frank. I'm curious about one of your night janitors, Raymond Martinez. Frank's expression turned guarded. Ray? He's one of my best. Shows up on time, never complains, does quality work. Is there a problem? Quite the opposite, Victoria assured him. I was impressed by his work. How would you feel if I were to consider him for another position in the company? Relief washed over Frank's face. Well, I'd hate to lose him, but Ray deserves a break. He's been through a lot. Oh, Victoria prompted. Frank seemed to debate how much to share, then said he's raising his daughter alone. Wife passed a few years back. Cancer, I think. That's why he dropped out of college. The man works 2 jobs, sometimes just to make ends meet, but he never brings his problems to work. Victoria nodded, filing away this information. And his technical skills? I understand he has an engineering background. Frank chuckled. Ray can fix anything. Last month, our industrial floor buffer broke down. Manufacturer said we needed to replace the motor, quoted us $3,000. Ray took it apart during his lunch break and had it running better than new by the end of his shift. Saved the company a bundle. I see. Where does he store his personal belongings while working? Frank gave her a curious look, but answered, Locker 27, end of the hall. Standard employee locker. Victoria thanked him and left, her mind already formulating a plan. She wasn't one for conventional hiring practices when she spotted real talent, and something told her Raymond Martinez was exactly what Meridian Technologies needed. That evening, Raymond arrived for his shift feeling anxious. He'd spent the day wondering if Miss Chen had reported the incident with the award to management. Though she'd seemed understanding last night, executives could be unpredictable. His supervisor hadn't mentioned anything morning, but that didn't mean he was in the clear. He stowed his lunch bag in his locker number 27, at the end of a row of identical metal cabinets, and changed into his uniform. As he was arranging his few personal items, he noticed a white envelope that hadn't been there yesterday. His name was printed on the front in precise handwriting. Inside was a simple note: Mr. Martinez, please report to conference room 4B at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Victoria Chen. Raymond stared at the note, his heart sinking. Conference rooms meant formal meeting. Formal meetings meant trouble. He couldn't afford to lose this job, not with Lily's new asthma medication costing nearly $200 a month after insurance. He tucked the note into his pocket and began his rounds, his movements mechanical as his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. By the time he reached the executive floor, he'd convinced himself he was going to be fired. Victoria's office was dark tonight, but the light in the adjacent conference room was on. As he pushed his cart past, he glanced inside and was startled to see the CEO herself sitting at the table, surrounded by technical diagrams and prototype models of what appeared to be a solar energy device. She looked up and caught his eye. Mr. Martinez. Perfect timing. Raymond froze, uncertain whether to continue with his duties or acknowledge her. Miss Chen, I was just come in for a moment, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Reluctantly, he parked his cart and entered the conference room. Up close, he could see that the diagrams were for a compact solar collection system, similar to one he'd worked on during his time at Cal Poly. I received your note, he said cautiously. I'll be there tomorrow at 2. Victoria nodded. Good, but since you're here, I'd like your opinion on something. She pushed one of the diagrams toward him. Our R&D team has been working on this portable solar generator for disaster relief situations, but they're having efficiency issues with the collection array. Raymond blinked in confusion. Why would the CEO ask a janitor about solar technology? Then he remembered he'd mentioned his engineering background. I'm not sure I should, please, Victoria interrupted. Humor me. Raymond hesitated, then leaned forward to examine the diagram. Despite his best efforts to remain detached, his engineer's mind engaged immediately. The design was innovative but flawed in several key areas. The panel configuration is causing energy loss, he said, pointing to the schematic. If you reorient these cells and add a secondary reflector here, you could increase efficiency by at least 20%. Victoria watched him intently as he continued pointing out issues and suggesting improvements. His initial reluctance giving way to genuine enthusiasm. His hands moved across the diagrams with assurance, his explanations clear and precise. How long would it take you to implement these changes? She asked when he finished. Raymond's head snapped up, suddenly remembering his position. I'm sorry, I'm just the janitor. Tomorrow at 2, Victoria said, gathering the diagrams. We're not discussing your current job, Mr. Martinez. We're discussing your future one. She stood, effectively ending their impromptu meeting. Don't be late. As Raymond returned to his cart, his mind reeling, Victoria watched him go with a satisfied smile. Her instincts had been right. Now she just needed to see what else she could discover about Raymond Martinez before tomorrow's meeting. She had a feeling his locker might hold the final pieces of the puzzle. Raymond barely slept that morning when he returned home from his shift. His mind kept replaying the strange encounter with Victoria Chen, trying to decipher what she had meant about discussing his future job. He didn't dare hope it meant what it seemed to imply. After dropping Lily off at school, he stood in front of his modest closet, staring at his limited professional wardrobe. It had been years since he'd needed anything more formal than his janitor's uniform. He finally settled on a navy blue button-down shirt and his only pair of khaki pants, neither of which had been worn in ages. Dad, you look different, Lily said when he picked her up from school, earlier than usual. At 9 years old, she missed very little. I have a meeting at work, he explained, straightening his collar nervously. Mrs. Rodriguez will stay with you until I get back. Is it about your promotion? Lily asked innocently. Raymond smiled sadly. It's not a promotion, sweetheart. Just a meeting. Well, you should get promoted. You're smarter than everyone, she declared with the absolute certainty only a child could possess. Raymond kissed the top of her head, wishing he shared her confidence. We'll see. Now be good for Mrs. Rodriguez, okay? He arrived at Meridian Technologies 45 minutes early, his stomach in knots. The security guard at the main entrance did a double take, clearly not used to seeing the night janitor in civilian clothes during daylight hours. I have a meeting with Ms. Chen, Raymond explained, showing the note he'd received. The guard nodded. You're cleared to go up, Mr. Martinez. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal. Raymond had cleaned these elevators countless times, but had rarely ridden in them as a passenger. He watched the numbers climb, each floor taking him further from the basement where he usually worked. He was so early that he found himself wandering the corridors of the 4th floor, examining the sleek glass offices and conference rooms with new eyes. The company's various achievements lined the walls: patents, awards, and photographs of landmark moments in Meridian's history. One photo caught his attention, a younger Victoria Chen standing beside what appeared to be an early prototype of the company's flagship renewable energy storage system. She was smiling broadly, her arm around an older man with kind eyes and a professor's rumpled appearance. That's my father, a voice said behind him. Raymond turned to find Victoria watching him, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in a sleek charcoal suit that radiated authority, but something in her demeanor seemed less intimidating than during their previous encounter. He was a brilliant engineer, she continued, moving to stand beside Raymond. He founded this company with the belief that clean energy could be both profitable and accessible to everyone. When he died 5 years ago, I promised to carry on that vision. I'm sorry for your loss, Raymond said quietly. Victoria nodded, then checked her watch. You're early. Good, let's talk in my office instead of the conference room. He followed her through the corridors, acutely aware of the curious glances from employees they passed. Victoria's office was exactly as he remembered it from his nightly cleaning rounds, except now it was bathed in natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. Please sit, she said, gesturing to one of the chairs facing her desk. Raymond sat stiffly, hands folded in his lap. Miss Chen, before we begin, I want to apologize again for the award. I know how important. Let's put that behind us, she interrupted. I'm more interested in what you did after breaking. She leaned forward. You have engineering training, problem-solving skills, and remarkable initiative, yet you're working as a night janitor. Why? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Life doesn't always go as planned, he answered carefully. Your employee file says you left college after 2 years, top of your class in engineering. What happened? Raymond tensed. He rarely discussed his past, especially with strangers, but something told him that honesty was his only option with Victoria Chen, my wife. Alina was diagnosed with an aggressive form of leukemia during my sophomore year. We had a newborn daughter. I had to choose school or family. It wasn't really a choice. Victoria's expression softened slightly. And after your wife passed? Raymond looked down at his hands. Medical bills, a mortgage, daycare costs. I took whatever jobs I could find. Eventually, I landed here because the night shift meant I could be with Lily during the day. Your daughter, Victoria said. How old is she now? 9. She's ... single quotes. He smiled despite his nervousness. Brilliant. Wants to be a scientist. Victoria nodded, as if confirming something to herself. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. To Raymond's surprise, it contained printouts of what appeared to be sketches. His sketches. Would you care to explain these? She asked, spreading them across the desk. Raymond recognized them immediately. Detailed technical drawings he'd made during his lunch breaks over the past year. Designs for more efficient solar collection system, improvements to existing technology, even a few speculative concepts for energy storage solutions. Where did you get these? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Your locker, Victoria replied unapologetically. Company policy states that employee lockers are subject to inspection at any time. Raymond felt his face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. Those drawings were private dreams he'd indulged during quiet moments, never intending for anyone else to see. That's an invasion of privacy, he said, struggling to keep his voice level. Perhaps, Victoria conceded, but necessary. Do you know what these are? She held up one of his sketches. Raymond swallowed hard. Just ideas. Nothing serious. On the contrary, this, she tapped the drawing, is a solution to an efficiency problem our R&D department has been struggling with for months. And this, she selected another sketch, could potentially increase the capacity of our flagship, battery design by 30%. She laid the drawings down and fixed him with an intense stare. Mr. Martinez, you've been developing proprietary technology for a Fortune 500 company while working as a janitor. In some circumstances, that could be considered intellectual property theft. Raymond felt the blood drain from his face. I never intended. I would never. Victoria held up a hand to stop his panicked explanation. I know, but what I need to understand is why you didn't bring these ideas forward through proper channels. He gave a bitter laugh. Miss Chen, I'm a night janitor with an incomplete degree. Who would take me seriously? I am, she said simply. The room fell silent as Raymond processed her words. I believe you possess the kind of innovative thinking Meridian needs, Victoria continued. The technical supervisor position requires someone who can not only manage our current projects but also push the boundaries of what's possible. Someone who sees solutions where others see only problems. She pushed a formal offer letter across the desk. The salary is triple what you're making now, with full benefits and flexible hours to accommodate your daughter's schedule. Raymond stared at the paper, unable to speak. The figures swam before his eyes. A salary that would transform his and Lily's lives overnight. Why? He finally managed to ask. Why me? Victoria picked up the crystal award he had repaired, turning it in the light. When my father started this company, he was working as a maintenance technician at MIT. No one would listen to his ideas because of his position. He vowed that if he ever succeeded, he would judge people by their capabilities, not their titles. She set the award down and met his gaze directly. You fixed this award when you could have hidden your mistake. You saw value in something broken and made it whole again. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need at Meridian. Raymond looked down at the offer letter again, his engineer's mind already calculating what this would mean. No more night shifts, proper health insurance for Lily, maybe even savings for her college fund, a chance to use his mind again after years of manual labor. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Victoria Chen smiled for the first time since they'd met. Say yes, Mr. Martinez, and then get ready to show us what you can really do. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Raymond accepted Victoria's offer with trembling hands, still half convinced he would wake up to find it had all been a dream. The transition happened with surprising speed. One day he was pushing a cleaning cart through empty corridors, and the next he was being introduced to the R&D team as their new technical supervisor. The lab was a technological wonderland that made Raymond's heart race with excitement. State-of-the-art equipment gleamed under bright lights, and half-finished prototypes dotted workbenches throughout the space. It was everything he had once dreamed of before life had pulled him in another direction. Not everyone welcomed him with open arms. Derek Winters, the senior engineer who had expected the promotion himself, made no effort to hide his resentment. "So you're the janitor," he said during their first meeting, the word dripping with disdain. "Interesting career trajectory." "Former janitor," Raymond corrected him quietly. "Current technical supervisor." Derek's smile didn't reach his eyes. "For now," single quotes, despite such challenges. Raymond threw himself into the work with the hunger of a man who had been starving for years. The technical problems that had stymied the team were puzzles he was eager to solve. Within days, he had restructured the approach to the solar collection system, incorporating the improvements he'd sketched during those solitary lunch breaks. Lily blossomed with the changes in their lives. Raymond was able to move them from their cramped one-bedroom apartment to a modest house near a good school. For the first time, she had her own bedroom, which she immediately filled with science posters and books. "Dad, is this really ours?" she asked the night they moved in, her eyes wide as she bounced on her new bed. "All ours, sweetheart," he assured her, his heart full. "And you don't have to work at night anymore? No more night shifts? I'll be home for dinner every evening," he promised. Lily threw her arms around his neck. "I told you they'd see how smart you are at work." Raymond gradually won over most of his team with his innovative ideas and humble approach. He never pretended to know everything, readily acknowledging his academic gap while demonstrating his practical genius daily. The prototype solar generator that had been stalled for months was now advancing rapidly toward production. Victoria kept her distance during this transition, allowing Raymond to establish himself without the shadow of her influence. But she watched his progress through project reports and team updates, quietly satisfied with her decision. 6 weeks after his promotion, she called him to her office again. "The board is impressed with the progress on the solar generator," she said without preamble. "Your modifications have increased efficiency by 28%, even better than your initial projection." Raymond nodded, still not entirely comfortable in his new business casual attire or the executive environment. "The team has been incredibly supportive. Well, most of them." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Problems?" "Nothing I can't handle," he assured her. Derek's persistent undermining and occasional sabotage were challenges he preferred to manage himself. "Good, because I have another proposition for you." She slid a folder across her desk. "The Palmer Foundation's Innovation Contest. First prize is a $1 million grant and significant industry exposure. Meridian has never entered before, but I think your solar generator would be perfect." Raymond flipped through the materials, his pulse quickening. The Palmer Foundation was renowned for identifying breakthrough technologies. Winning would establish both his credentials and Meridian's commitment to accessible renewable energy. "The deadline is in 6 weeks, Victoria continued. "You'd need to perfect the prototype and prepare a comprehensive presentation. It would mean longer hours, more pressure." "What about my arrangement for Lily?" Raymond asked. "I promised her I'd be home for dinner." Victoria considered this. "We could set up a temporary workspace for her here after school. The conference room adjacent to the lab has plenty of space for homework. Would that work?" Raymond was touched by her consideration. "That would be perfect. Thank you. Then you'll take on the project?" He nodded. "Absolutely." The next month and a half became a blur of focused work and late nights. Raymond led his team with a mixture of technical brilliance and collaborative spirit that gradually won over even the most skeptical members. Only Derek remained aloof, his resentment hardening into something more problematic. Lily adapted to the new routine with enthusiasm, turning the conference room into her personal study space each afternoon. She completed her homework surrounded by technical diagrams and prototype parts, occasionally offering childlike observations that sometimes sparked useful insights for the team. One evening, as Raymond was fine-tuning a component of the generator, he looked up to find Victoria sitting with Lily in the conference room. His daughter was animatedly explaining her science fair project, an elementary model of the very solar technology her father was perfecting. "The sun's energy gets trapped here," Lily was saying, pointing to her hand-drawn diagram. "And then it goes through these special cells that turn it into electricity." Victoria nodded seriously. "And what happens when the sun isn't shining?" "That's the tricky part," Lily admitted. "Dad says storage is the holy grail of renewable energy." "Your dad is very smart," Victoria said. "He's the smartest," Lily agreed confidently. "Mom always said he was going to change the world someday." Raymond felt a tightness in his chest at the mention of Elena. Lily rarely spoke of her mother, whose face she knew only from photographs. Victoria noticed him watching and motioned him over. "Your daughter has been explaining solar energy to me. I think she might give you a run for your money in a few years." Raymond smiled, resting a hand on Lily's shoulder. "She's way ahead of where I was at her age. Dad, can Ms. Chen come to my science fair next week? Lily asked suddenly. I want to show her my project when it's finished. Raymond opened his mouth to politely decline on Victoria's behalf. Surely the CEO of Meridian Technologies had more important things to do, but Victoria spoke first. I would be honored, Lily. Just have your dad send me the details. Later that night, after tucking Lily into bed in their new home, Raymond sat at his kitchen table surrounded by technical drawings. The prototype was nearly complete, but something still wasn't quite right with the energy transfer system. His mind kept circling back to a solution, but it remained frustratingly out of reach. His phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria. How's the breakthrough coming? He smiled wryly and replied, still breaking. 3 dots appeared as she typed her response. Sometimes you need to step away to see the answer clearly. Get some sleep, Raymond. He stared at her message, struck by the use of his first name, a small but noticeable shift in their professional relationship. Then he noticed the time, 11:43 p.m. Was Victoria Chen working this late too? The thought of her sitting in her office at this hour, perhaps sending similar encouraging texts to other project leads, made him feel both less alone and slightly disappointed. Raymond put down his phone and gathered up his drawing. She was right. Fresh eyes in the morning would help. As he stood to leave the kitchen, his gaze fell on one of Lily's science books left open on the counter. It was turned to a page about biomimicry, the practice of emulating nature's patterns to solve human problems. He paused, then slowly picked up the book. The page showed a simple diagram of how certain plants orient their leaves throughout the day to maximize sun exposure. Something clicked in his mind, a connection forming between this elementary concept and the complex problem he'd been grappling with. Energized by sudden inspiration, he returned to his drawings, sketching rapidly. By the time he finally went to bed at 2 a.m., he had solved the energy transfer problem with an elegant solution inspired by his daughter's science book. The next morning, he arrived at work early, eager to implement his new design. As he entered the lab, he found Derek already there, hunched over the prototype with a screwdriver in hand. Derek? Raymond's voice echoed in the otherwise empty lab. What are you doing here so early? The senior engineer straightened up quickly, his body tensing like a cornered animal. Just fixing a calibration issue I noticed yesterday, he said, his tone casual but his eyes darting nervously to the exposed components of the prototype. Raymond moved closer, trying to see what modifications Derek had been making. I don't remember any calibration issues in yesterday's testing. That's because some of us actually have formal engineering training, Derek replied with a tight smile. There are subtleties you might miss. Raymond felt a flicker of the old insecurity, the imposter syndrome that sometimes haunted him despite his proven abilities. But as he examined the prototype, he noticed several connections that were definitely not arranged according to the specifications they had agreed upon yesterday. These aren't calibration adjustments, Raymond said quietly. You've completely reconfigured the primary transfer circuit. Derek's expression hardened. I'm improving it. Your design was fundamentally flawed. The design that increased efficiency by 28%. Raymond kept his voice level, though anger was beginning to simmer beneath his calm exterior. The design that the entire team signed off on yesterday? Look, Martinez, I've been generous letting you play engineer, Derek snapped, dropping all pretense. But this competition is too important for Meridian to risk on an untested design from a glorified janitor. Raymond took a deep breath, remembering Victoria's faith in him and all he had accomplished in the past weeks. Put it back, Derek. Now, or what? Derek challenged, stepping closer. You'll tell Chen? Go ahead. I'll explain how I was fixing your amateur mistakes. Who do you think she'll believe, a senior engineer with 15 years of experience and an actual degree? Or the janitor she hired out of pity? I don't need Victoria to fight my battles, Raymond said, moving to the prototype and beginning to undo Derek's changes. And I don't need your sabotage. If you have concerns about my design, bring them to the team meeting like everyone else. Derek grabbed Raymond's wrist, stopping him. I've worked at this company for 7 years. I've earned that promotion, not you. The tension in the room was palpable. Both men locked in a silent battle of wills until the lab door opened and Victoria Chen walked in. Both men immediately stepped away from each other, Derek releasing Raymond's wrist with obvious reluctance. Ms. Chen, Derek said, switching instantly to a deferential tone. You're here early. Victoria's sharp gaze took in the scene, the partially disassembled prototype, the tension between the two men, the flush of anger on Raymond's face. As are you both, she observed. Making progress, I hope? Raymond hesitated, unwilling to escalate the situation with a direct accusation. We were just discussing some technical differences. Victoria raised an eyebrow. At 6:30 in the morning? Must be quite the discussion. Derek cleared his throat. I was just explaining to Raymond why his design needs substantial revision before the Palmer presentation. As senior engineer, I feel responsible for ensuring we don't embarrass the company. Victoria turned to Raymond. And your response to these concerns? Raymond looked directly at Derek, then back to Victoria. I'd be happy to review any specific issues with the entire team. Transparency is important for a project like this. A flicker of approval crossed Victoria's face. Excellent. Then you can both present your perspectives at this morning's team meeting. She checked her watch. That gives you 2 hours to prepare your argument. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Derek? The next time you feel the need to make unauthorized modifications to a team project, come see me first. Derek's face paled. I was just 6 security cameras in this lab, Victoria interrupted, her voice dangerously soft. I review the footage personally when it comes to high-priority projects. Remember that. After she left, the lab fell into stunned silence. Derek grabbed his tablet and stormed out without another word. leaving Raymond alone with the prototype and the realization that Victoria had been watching out for him more closely than he'd imagined. The team meeting that morning was tense but productive. With Victoria present, Derek was forced to articulate his actual technical concerns rather than simply undermining Raymond's authority. Some of his points were valid, and Raymond incorporated them into the design, demonstrating both his technical competence and his willingness to collaborate. By the end of the day, the prototype was back on track, with Derek reluctantly contributing his expertise under Victoria's watchful eye. The incident had cleared the air, and while Derek would never be Raymond's friend, a grudging professional respect began to develop between them. The evening of Lily's science fair arrived, and Raymond found himself nervously straightening his daughter's display board in the crowded elementary school gymnasium. Her projector working model demonstrating how solar cells could be oriented for maximum efficiency throughout the day was impressive for a 9-year-old, especially since she had built most of it herself with minimal help from him. "Is Ms. Chen really coming?" Lily asked for the third time, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "She said she would," Raymond replied, though privately he wondered if the CEO would actually find time for a children's science fair amid her countless responsibility. Lily's face fell slightly. "It's okay if she's too busy. I know she's important." Single quotes, Raymond knelt down to her level. "Hey, your project is important too, and even if she can't make it, I'm incredibly proud of what you've created here. Thanks." "Dad," Lily said, though her disappointment was evident. The science fair began with students stationed at their projects as judges and parents wandered through the displays. Raymond stood back, allowing Lily to explain her work independently. She was in the middle of a detailed explanation to one of the judges when a ripple of whispers and turned heads spread through the gymnasium. Victoria Chen had arrived, dressed in a sleek business suit that stood out amid the casual attire of the other adults. She scanned the room briefly before spotting Raymond and making her way directly toward him. "I apologize for being late," she said, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. "Board meeting ran over." Raymond was genuinely touched that she had come at all. "Thank you for making it. Lily will be thrilled." Victoria nodded, then turned her attention to Lily, who had just finished with the judge and was staring at Victoria with wide-eyed amazement. "You came," Lily exclaimed. "I promised I would," Victoria replied, kneeling down to examine the project at eye level with Lily. "Now tell me about your solar tracking system." For the next 15 minutes, Lily gave Victoria a comprehensive explanation of her project, complete with demonstrations and detailed answers to Victoria's surprisingly technical questions. Raymond watched in amazement as the CEO of Meridian Technologies engaged with his daughter with the same focused attention she might give to a high-level business presentation. "You know," Victoria said when Lily had finished, "we're working on something very similar at Meridian, but I think your design has some advantages we hadn't considered." Lily beamed with pride. "Really? Really?" Victoria confirmed. "The way you've incorporated the tracking mechanism is quite elegant, simple but effective." She glanced at Raymond. "She has your gift for finding uncomplicated solutions to complex problems," the judge returned, clipboard in hand, clearly eager to speak with the impressive woman who was giving such serious attention to Lily's project. Victoria smoothly introduced herself and proceeded to explain why. Lily's project demonstrated exceptional scientific thinking for her age group. By the end of the evening, Lily had won first prize in her division, and Victoria had left an indelible impression on both the Martinez family and the entire elementary school community. As they walked to the parking lot, Lily clutching her blue ribbon and certificate, Victoria surprised them with an invitation. "I thought perhaps we might celebrate Lily's success with ice cream," she suggested. "That is, if it's not too late on a school night." Lily looked pleadingly at her father. "Please, Dad, just this once?" Raymond hesitated only briefly. "I suppose we could make an exception for a science fair champion." The small ice cream parlor near the school was nearly empty when they arrived. Lily, still buzzing with excitement from her win, insisted on ordering the most colorful sundae on the menu. Raymond chose a simple vanilla cone, while Victoria surprised them both by selecting a double scoop of mint chocolate chip. "I wouldn't have pegged you for a mint chocolate chip person," Raymond remarked as they settled into a booth, Lily immediately attacking her mountain of ice cream, sprinkles, and syrup. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "What kind of ice cream did you imagine I'd prefer?" Raymond considered this. "Something sophisticated. Dark chocolate, maybe? Or coffee?" "I get enough sophistication at work," she replied with a slight smile. "Some things should just be fun." It was the most unguarded comment he'd heard from her. A tiny glimpse behind the polished CEO exterior. Raymond found himself wondering what other surprising preferences Victoria Chen might have hidden beneath her professional veneer. "Lily," Victoria said, turning to the girl, "your project was genuinely impressive. Have you always been interested in science?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, a smear of chocolate sauce on her chin. "Since forever. Dad and I watch documentaries together, and he explains the hard parts." "She has a natural aptitude," Raymond said proudly. "Gets it from her mother. Elena was studying to be a biologist when we met." "At college?" Victoria asked. Raymond nodded. "Cal Poly. We were both scholarship kids with big dreams." A shadow passed over his face briefly, but he pushed it away, unwilling to let old grief intrude on this moment of celebration. Victoria seemed to sense the shift and directed her next question to Lily. "What kind of scientist do you want to be when you grow up?" "An inventor like Dad," Lily replied without hesitation. "I want to make things that help people. Victoria smiled. That's a worthy ambition. As the evening progressed, Raymond was struck by how different Victoria was outside the office, still precise and thoughtful in her speech, but warmer, more relaxed. She listened to Lily's rambling stories with genuine interest and shared a few carefully selected anecdotes from her own childhood that had the girl giggling. When Lily went to the restroom, Victoria turned to Raymond with a more serious expression. "I wanted to apologize for putting you in a difficult position with Derek this morning," she said. "I should have addressed his behavior sooner." Raymond shook his head. "You don't need to apologize. I appreciate your support, but I also need to fight my own battles at work." "Agreed. But you should know that Derek's behavior wasn't just about professional jealousy." She hesitated. "His father and my father were colleagues years ago. There was some bad blood between them when my father started Meridian. I suspect Derek sees undermining you as a way to get back at my family." "That's complicated," Raymond said, surprised by her candor. "Corporate politics usually are." Victoria's expression softened slightly. "But I want you to know that my decision to promote you wasn't based on sentiment. Your work speaks for itself." Single quotes. Before Raymond could respond, Lily returned and the conversation shifted back to lighter topics. By the time they said goodbye in the parking lot, something had shifted in their dynamic. Tentative bridge forming between their professional relationship and something more personal. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as the Palmer Foundation competition deadline approached. Raymond's biomimicry-inspired solution had transformed the solar generator prototype, creating a system that automatically adjusted its collection panels to track the sun's position throughout the day, maximizing energy capture with minimal mechanical complexity. The team was energized by the breakthrough, even Derek grudgingly acknowledging the elegance of the design. The prototype now exceeded all their initial performance targets, generating more power from a smaller footprint than any comparable system on the market. 2 weeks before the competition, Victoria called an all-hands meeting to review their progress. "The board is impressed," she announced to the assembled team, "but the Palmer Foundation judges will be looking for more than just technical excellence. They want innovation that addresses real-world problems." She turned to Raymond. "I'd like you to lead the presentation team. You have a unique perspective on the practical applications of this technology." A ripple of surprise ran through the room. Presentation teams were typically led by senior management or marketing specialists, not technical supervisors. "Are you sure?" Raymond asked, painfully aware of his inexperience with high-stakes presentations. "Absolutely," Victoria confirmed. "Your understanding of both the technical aspects and the human impact of this technology is exactly what we need to connect with the judges." That evening, Raymond stayed late at the office, rehearsing his presentation, while Lily worked on homework in the adjacent conference room. Victoria had stopped by earlier to offer guidance on his speaking points, but had been called away to an emergency investor call. As Raymond practiced explaining a particularly complex aspect of the energy transfer system, he heard a small voice from the doorway. "You're saying it wrong, Dad." He turned to find Lily watching him, her homework abandoned. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "You're using too many big words," she explained, crossing the room to stand beside him. "When you explain things to me, you make them simple. You should do it like that." Single quotes. Raymond considered her advice. She was right. He'd been falling into technical jargon, trying to sound like what he thought a proper engineer should sound like. "Show me," he said, gesturing to the prototype. Lily stood beside the solar generator and began explaining it in her own words, stripping away the complexity to reveal the fundamental elegance of the design. Raymond watched in amazement as his daughter intuitively grasped what would make this technology compelling to non-engineers. When Victoria returned an hour later, she found them both at the whiteboard, Raymond noting down Lily's simplified explanations while his daughter drew stick figures using the solar generator in various settings: hospitals, schools, disaster relief tents. Victoria observed silently from the doorway, a curious expression on her face. When they finally noticed her, she stepped forward. "I think we've been overthinking our approach," she said, gesturing to Lily's drawing. "This is exactly what the Palmer judges need to see, not just how it works, but why it matters." The days before the competition blurred together in a flurry of preparations. Raymond divided his time between final technical adjustments and presentation rehearsals. Derek, perhaps sensing which way the wind was blowing, had set aside his resentment to focus on ensuring the prototype performed flawlessly during demonstration. The night before, they were scheduled to leave for the competition in San Francisco. Raymond worked later than usual, triple-checking every component of both the prototype and his presentation. When he finally emerged from the lab at nearly midnight, he was surprised to find Victoria in her office, the lights still on. He hesitated at her door, then knocked softly. "You're here late." She looked up from her computer, fatigue evident in her eyes despite her immaculate appearance. "Final review of the quarterly reports. The board meeting couldn't be postponed even for the Palmer competition." "You're not coming tomorrow?" Raymond asked, unable to hide his disappointment. "I'll join you the following day in time for the final presentation," she assured him. "The team can handle the preliminary setup without me." Raymond nodded, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in his chest. He'd grown accustomed to Victoria's steady presence, her quiet confidence bolstering his own. "You're ready for this, Raymond," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "The work you've done these past months, it's extraordinary." "Thank you for giving me the chance," he replied. Not many people would have seen past the janitor's uniform. Victoria stood and moved around her desk, closing the distance between them. Not many janitors fix broken awards instead of reporting them. Her voice was softer than usual, almost intimate in the quiet office. For a moment they stood there, the air between them charged with something neither was ready to name. Then Victoria took a step back, professional demeanor sliding back into place. "Get some rest," she said. "Tomorrow's a big day." Raymond nodded and turned to leave, unaware that this would be the last normal conversation they would have before everything changed. The morning of their departure for San Francisco dawned bright and clear. Raymond had arranged for Lily to stay with Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who had become like a grandmother to the girl. As he packed the last of his presentation materials, Lily watched from the doorway of his bedroom. "Wish I could come with," she said, a hint of wistfulness in her voice. "It's just for 2 days," Raymond assured her, zipping his small suitcase. "And when I get back, I'll tell you all about it. Maybe even bring you a souvenir from Fisherman's Wharf." "Not a souvenir," Lily said, rolling her eyes in that particular way only 9-year-olds can manage. "I want to know if our design wins." Raymond smiled at her use of "our" in many ways. It was true Lily's simplification of the presentation had transformed their approach, making the complex technology accessible to non-technical judges. "I'll call you as soon as we know the results," he promised. "And remember, even if we don't win, it's the journey, not the destination," Lily finished, mimicking his voice with startling accuracy. "You say that about everything, Dad." He laughed and pulled her into a hug. "That's because it's always true." The Meridian team remanned. Derek and 2 other engineers traveled to San Francisco in the company's private jet, a luxury Raymond was still getting accustomed to. Derek remained professionally distant during the flight, focused on his tablet, while the others discussed last-minute presentation strategies. Upon arrival, they were escorted to the Palmer Foundation's impressive headquarters in the heart of the financial district. The competition area occupied an entire floor of the gleaming glass tower, with designated spaces for each finalist team to set up their prototypes. As they unloaded their equipment, Raymond noticed the impressive displays from their competitors, major energy companies and renowned research institutions from around the world. For the first time since accepting Victoria's challenge, doubt crept. What was he doing here? A former janitor competing against teams of PhDs and industry veterans. Derek seemed to sense his unease. "Intimidated, Martinez?" he asked quietly as they assembled their prototype. Raymond squared his shoulders. "Focused," he corrected, though his mouth had gone dry. "You should be intimidated," Derek continued, tightening a connection on the solar array. "That team from MIT has been developing their technology for 5 years. Germans have government backing, and Helix's Energy's team is led by Dr. James Chen." "Chen?" Raymond paused. "Any relation to Victoria?" Derek's mouth twisted into a humorless smile. "Her brother. Didn't she mention that?" Raymond's stomach dropped. Victoria had never mentioned having a brother in the industry, let alone one competing against them. The revelation felt like a betrayal, though he knew rationally it wasn't his business who Victoria's family members were. "It doesn't matter," he said finally. "Our technology speaks for itself." The first day consisted of technical evaluations, with judges moving from station to station to examine each prototype. Raymond found his confidence returning as he explained their innovation using the simplified language Lily had helped him develop. The judges seemed impressed, particularly by the adaptive tracking system inspired by heliotropic plants. That evening, the Meridian team gathered in Raymond's hotel room to review their performance and make final adjustments for the next day's formal presentation. "We're in the top tier," Derek acknowledged grudgingly, reviewing the preliminary feedback, "but Helix Energy is still the favorite. Their storage system is revolutionary. Our approach is more practical for real-world applications," Raymond countered. "That's what matters to the Palmer Foundation, technology that can make an immediate difference." As the others filed out to get dinner, Derek lingered behind. "Why did Chen really choose you?" he asked abruptly. Raymond looked up, surprised by the direct question. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," Derek pressed. "She could have promoted anyone, hired outside talent with actual credentials. Why a janitor?" Raymond considered the question seriously. "Because I fixed something broken instead of hiding my mistake," he said finally. "Sometimes that's all it takes, seeing a problem and taking responsibility for solving it." Derek stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once before leaving without another word. Left alone, Raymond tried calling Victoria to update her on their progress, but the call went straight to voicemail. He left a brief message and tried to ignore his disappointment. Later that night, as he was reviewing his presentation one final time, his phone rang. Expecting Victoria, he was surprised to see Lily's name on the screen. "Hey, sweet pea, isn't it past your bedtime?" "Dad," Lily's voice was tight with anxiety. "Something's wrong with Merce Rodriguez. She fell down and she's not waking up properly. I called 911 like you taught me, but I'm scared." Raymond's world narrowed to a single point of terror. "Where are you now? Are you safe?" "I'm waiting by the front door for the ambulance," Lily said, her voice small but steady. "Mrs. Rodriguez is on the kitchen floor. She's breathing, but she won't talk to me." "You did exactly the right thing," Raymond assured her, already pulling on his shoes and grabbing his wallet. "I'm coming home right now. Stay on the phone with me until the ambulance arrives." He raced down to the hotel lobby, his mind churning with impossible calculation. The last flight to Los Angeles had already left. Driving would take 6 hours. His daughter was alone with an unconscious elderly woman, and he was 300 miles away. As he was frantically explaining his situation to the concierge, hoping against hope for some travel solution, a familiar voice spoke behind him. "Raymond, what's wrong?" He turned to find Victoria Chen, elegant in a charcoal business suit despite the late hour, having just arrived at the hotel. "It's Lily," he explained quickly. Mrs. Rodriguez had some kind of medical emergency. Lily's alone with her, waiting for an ambulance. I need to get home. Victoria didn't hesitate. The company helicopter is on the roof. It was supposed to take me to a meeting in Palo Alto tomorrow, but it's yours. It can have you home in an hour. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by a new worry. The presentation can wait, Victoria finished firmly. Family comes first, always. 20 minutes later, Raymond was in the air, still on the phone with Lily, who had reported that paramedics were now treating Mrs. Rodriguez. Victoria had accompanied him to the helipad, making calls to arrange for a medical team to meet Lily at their house and ensure Mrs. Rodriguez received the best possible care. Just before he boarded, Victoria had squeezed his arm, her eyes meeting his with unexpected warmth. Go. I'll handle everything here. Single quotes now. Watching the lights of San Francisco recede below him, Raymond was overwhelmed by gratitude not just for the helicopter, but for the unflinching support Victoria had offered without a second thought. When the pilot handed him a note midway through the flight, he was surprised to see Victoria's precise handwriting. Raymond, Dr. Chen is indeed my brother. I should have told you. There's much more you should know. We'll talk when you and Lily are safe. For now, trust that I have your best interests at heart. Always, V. The cryptic message left him with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Whatever game the Chen siblings were playing, Victoria had just chosen a side. His side. The helicopter touched down on a medical center helipad just after midnight. A car was already waiting to rush Raymond to his home, where he found an ambulance parked outside, its lights silently pulsing in the quiet neighborhood. His heart hammering, he sprinted up the driveway. Lily was sitting on the front porch steps, wrapped in a blanket and accompanied by a female paramedic. When she saw Raymond, she leapt up and ran to him, colliding with his chest in a fierce hug. Dad! The single word contained volumes of relief. Raymond held her tightly, his world finally righting itself with her safe in his arms. Are you okay? What happened to Mrs. Rodriguez? The paramedic approached. She appears to have suffered a stroke. Her condition is serious but stable. We're transporting her to Memorial Hospital now. She was making dinner, Lily explained, her voice muffled against Raymond's shirt. Then she made a funny sound and fell down. I tried to help her up, but she couldn't talk properly. You did everything right, Raymond assured her, smoothing her hair. You probably saved her life by calling 911 so quickly. After speaking briefly with the paramedics and promising to visit Mrs. Rodriguez in the hospital the next day, Raymond took Lily inside. Despite her protestations that she wasn't tired, she fell asleep almost as soon as her head hit the pillow, the stress of the evening finally catching up with her. Raymond sat beside her bed for a long time, watching her breathe, overwhelmed by how quickly life could change and how fortunate he was that Victoria had arrived at precisely the right moment to help. He thought about her note and wondered what she meant about having more to tell him. His phone vibrated with a text message. Everyone safe? V. He replied, yes. Mers are at hospital. Lily asleep. Thank you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Good. Try to rest. I'm handling everything here. Raymond stared at the message, trying to read between the lines. What exactly was she handling? And why did it feel like there was something bigger going on than just the competition? The morning came too quickly. After making Lily breakfast and arranging for her to spend the day with a school friend's family, Raymond called the hospital for an update on Mrs. Rodriguez. The news was cautiously positive. She was responding well to treatment, though she would need extensive rehabilitation. His next call was to Derek, who answered on the first ring. Martinez, are you coming back? I can't leave Lily, Raymond explained. How's the presentation prep going? Derek was silent for a moment. Chen took over. Victoria? Raymond was surprised. She's presenting? She arrived last night, reviewed everything, and announced she'd handle the presentation herself. Derek's tone was difficult to read. She's been in closed-door meetings with the Palmer board all morning. Raymond frowned. That wasn't the plan. Victoria was supposed to be there for support, not to take over. What about the technical demonstration? The team is handling it. Look, I've got to go. We're up in 20 minutes. The call ended, leaving Raymond with a growing sense of unease. Why would Victoria suddenly change their carefully constructed presentation strategy? And what were these private meetings with the board? He tried calling her directly, but the call went straight to voicemail. With no other option, Raymond settled in to wait for news, taking Lily to visit Mrs. Rodriguez that afternoon. The elderly woman was awake but confused, able to recognize them but struggling to speak. She's going to need long-term care, the doctor explained quietly to Raymond in the hallway. Her home won't be safe for her to return to, at least not for several months. Raymond nodded, adding another worry to his growing list. Mrs. Rodriguez lived alone with no family nearby. Who would ensure she received proper care? As they left the hospital, his phone rang. It was Victoria. Raymond, her voice was clipped, professional. We need to talk. I'm flying back tonight. Can you meet me at the office at 8 p.m.? Victoria, what's happening with the presentation? Derek said you took over. Not over the phone, she interrupted. There are complications. I'll explain everything tonight. Before he could press further, she ended the call. Raymond spent the rest of the day distracted, his mind churning with possibilities. When he dropped Lily off with her friend's family for a sleepover arranged at the last minute when Victoria called, the girl seemed to sense his preoccupation. Is it about the competition? She asked. Did we lose? I don't know yet, Raymond admitted. But whatever happens, we built something amazing together. That's what matters. Lily studied his face with disconcerting perception. You're worried about something else. Raymond managed to smile. Just grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about Miss Chen? Lily asked, surprising him. You look at her the way Mia's dad looks at her mom. Heat rushed to Raymond's face. Complicated. Grown-ups always say that when they don't want to explain things, Lily observed sagely before hugging him goodbye. Raymond arrived at Meridian Technologies 15 minutes early, parking in the now familiar executive lot rather than the service entrance he had used for years. The building was mostly empty, the security guard nodding in recognition as Raymond badged in. The executive floor was dark except for the soft glow emanating from Victoria's office. Raymond paused outside her door, struck by déjà vu. How many times had he stood in this exact spot, cleaning cart in hand, invisible to the power brokers whose spaces he maintained? Victoria looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. She was still dressed in her presentation suit, though she had removed the jacket and rolled up her sleeves, the most casual he had ever seen her at the office. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. How is Lily and Mrs. Rodriguez? Lily's fine. Mrs. Rodriguez is stable but will need extensive care. Raymond remained standing. Victoria, what's going on? Did we lose the competition? She sighed, running a hand through her usually immaculate hair. We didn't lose. We withdrew. Withdrew? Raymond repeated incredulously. Why would you? Because my brother was going to steal your technology. Victoria interrupted, her voice sharp with barely contained anger. James recognized your design approach immediately. He's been working on something similar at Helix for years, but your biomimicry solution solved problems his team couldn't crack. Raymond sank into the chair, stunned. How could he steal it? We have patents pending. Patents can be challenged. Designs can be modified just enough to circumvent intellectual property laws. Victoria's expression hardened. James has done it before. It's how he built Helix, by appropriating others' innovations and outmaneuvering them legally. So withdrawing protects our design? Raymond was struggling to understand. Temporarily, Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. But it's not just about the technology. She turned to face him, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal genuine distress. James figured out why I was so personally invested in this project. He threatened to expose everything about you, about how I found you. Raymond felt a chill. What do you mean, found me? Victoria took a deep breath. Raymond, our meeting wasn't an accident. I've been looking for you for almost a decade. Raymond stared at Victoria, trying to process her words. Looking for me? I don't understand. Victoria moved back to her desk and opened a drawer, withdrawing a worn manila folder that looked out of place among her meticulously organized belongings. She placed it on the desk between them. 10 years ago, my father's health was failing, she began, her voice quieter than Raymond had ever heard it. He had built Meridian from nothing, but his dream was never just about creating a successful company. He wanted to democratize renewable energy, make it accessible to everyone. She opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings, printouts of academic papers, and what appeared to be contest entry forms from years past. His final project was a portable solar generator for a disaster, essentially the same concept we've been developing for the Palmer company. But he couldn't solve the efficiency problem. Victoria's fingers traced over a faded schematic. He kept saying he needed someone who could think differently, see solutions where others saw only obstacles. Raymond leaned forward, increasingly confused. What does this have to do with me? Victoria pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping and handed it to him. The headline read, "Engineering Student Wins Innovation Prize with Solar Concept." Below was a grainy photograph of a much younger Raymond, proudly holding a small trophy beside an early prototype of a solar collection system. Cal Poly, Spring Showcase 2014, Victoria said. My father was a judge. He was impressed by your approach, said you had natural instincts that couldn't be taught. He wanted to offer you an internship at Meridian. Raymond remembered the showcase. Vividly, it had been one of the proudest moments of his life. Elena had been there, 5 months pregnant with Lily, beaming with pride, but no one from Meridian had ever contacted him. I never received any offer, he said, frowning. Because my father had his first stroke the following week, Victoria explained. By the time he recovered enough to return to work, months had passed. He tried to find you, but you had withdrawn from the university. Elena got sick, Raymond said softly. The pregnancy was already higher risk, and then the leukemia diagnosis. Everything happened so fast. Victoria nodded. My father didn't give up, though. He kept your project file, said someday he'd find you and offer you a place at Meridian. It became something of an obsession for him during his final years. She pulled out another document, a handwritten note on Meridian letterhead. This was in his personal effects after he died, a letter he never sent. Raymond took it with trembling hands. The handwriting was shaky but determined. Mr. Martinez, your approach to solar energy collection demonstrates the kind of innovative thinking that could change millions of lives. At Meridian, we believe talent should be nurtured regardless of circumstance. When you're ready, there will always be a place for you here. Edward Chen. A lump formed in Raymond's throat. The recognition he had craved as a young engineer had been there all along, waiting for him, while he mopped floors and emptied trash bins just to keep a roof over his daughter's head. After my father died, Victoria continued, I found his files, including yours. He made me promise to find you, to fulfill his intention of bringing you to Meridian. But you had disappeared. No digital footprint, no current address. I was just trying to survive, Raymond said. After Elena died, there were medical bills, funeral costs, ... I took whatever jobs I could find, moved whenever I couldn't make rent. Finding work as an engineer without a degree seemed impossible. Victoria's expression softened with genuine empathy. I hired private investigators, set up alerts with employment agencies. 4 years, nothing. Then 3 years ago, when reviewing the janitorial staff contracts, I saw your name. Raymond remembered that day filling out paperwork in the basement office, grateful for the night shift that would allow him to be with Lily during the day. He had no idea the CEO herself had been searching for him. "You knew I was working here for 3 years and never said anything?" he asked, a note of hurt in his voice. Victoria looked away. "I wanted to approach you immediately, but, it was complicated. The board was in turmoil after my father's death. My brother had left to start Helix, taking key team members with him. I was fighting to maintain control of the company while honoring my father's vision." She met his gaze directly. "And frankly, I wasn't sure how to approach." "Hello, my late father thought you were a genius. Would you like to stop cleaning toilets and design solar technology instead? It seemed insensitive, even cruel if you weren't interested." "So you waited for me to break your award," Raymond said with a hint of wry humor. A small smile flickered across Victoria's face. "I hadn't planned that part, but when I saw how you fixed it, not just adequately, but beautifully, meticulously, I knew my father had been right about you. It wasn't just engineering skill. It was care, attention to detail, and personal responsibility. Why didn't you tell me all this when you promoted me?" Victoria sighed. "I wanted you to believe you'd earned the position on your own merit, which you did. I was afraid if you knew about my father's interests, you might think it was charity, or worse, that I only valued you because of his obsession." Raymond absorbed this, his emotions a complex tangle of gratitude, confusion, and lingering hurt. "And your brother? How does he fit into this?" Victoria's expression darkened. "James never shared our father's vision of accessible, renewable energy. He's brilliant, but ruthless, believes technology should be profitable first, beneficial second. When I promoted you and fast-tracked the solar generator project, he became suspicious." "Of what?" "That I'd found you, my father's missing prodigy." Victoria gathered the papers back into the folder. "James has been monitoring our patent applications. When he saw your biomimicry approach, he recognized your work from the Cal Poly showcase. He knew exactly who you were, and that's why we withdrew from the competition," Raymond concluded. "But I still don't understand the threat. What could he expose?" Victoria's professional composure finally cracked completely, revealing genuine distress. "He's threatening to go public with claims that I manipulated you, that I deliberately kept you in a menial position for years while studying your ideas, then promoted you only to exploit your talents for Meridian's benefit." Raymond's jaw dropped. "That's absurd. You've done nothing but help me." "Perception matters more than truth in the corporate world," Victoria said bitterly. "If James spins this story to the board and the press, the janitor kept in the basement until the CEO needed his ideas, it could destroy both our reputations and derail the entire project." She rubbed her temples. "A rare display of vulnerability. My father's legacy, your future at Meridian, the solar generator that could help thousands. It's all at risk because of my brother's vindictiveness." Raymond sat back, trying to process everything. The past 3 months of his life, the promotion, the project, his growing relationship with Victoria had been built on a foundation he hadn't even known existed. Yet the work itself, the innovations he'd created, the respect he'd earned from his team, those were real. "What happens now?" he asked finally. Victoria straightened, her strategic mind visibly reasserting control. "That depends on you, Raymond. Now that you know everything, we need to decide our next move, together." Raymond stood and paced the length of Victoria's office, processing everything he'd just learned. His life had been unknowingly intertwined with the Chen family for a decade, a parallel narrative running beneath his struggles, his grief, his quiet perseverance. "Your brother," he said finally, turning to face Victoria. "What does he really want?" Victoria's analytical mind had clearly been working on this question. "Control. Specifically, control of our father's legacy. If he can discredit me and acquire your technology, he solidifies Helix's position as the true inheritor of Edward Chen's vision." Raymond nodded slowly. "Then we don't hide. We go public first." Victoria blinked. "What do you mean?" "Your father wanted to find me. You fulfilled that promise. There's nothing shameful in that story. It's actually rather remarkable." Raymond moved back to the desk, a plan forming. "What if instead of withdrawing from the competition, we hold a press conference? We tell the true story, all of it, before your brother can twist it." "That's risky," Victoria said, though he could see her considering the strategy. "The board will appreciate transparency and the positive press," Raymond finished. "Think about it. Meridian's CEO fulfills father's dying wish, discovers engineering prodigy working as company janitor. That's a story people will want to believe in." A slow smile spread across Victoria's face. "You're right. James is expecting me to hide, to protect the company's image through discretion. He's not prepared for us to embrace the narrative. There's more," Raymond continued, the plan expanding in his mind. "The Palmer competition isn't the only venue for our technology. What if we announce an initiative, the Edward Chen Foundation, dedicated to making renewable energy accessible in disaster zones and underserved communities?" Victoria's eyes widened. "Using your solar generator as the flagship technology." "Our solar generator," Raymond corrected. "Developed by a team that believes in your father's original vision." Victoria stood, energy radiating from her. "We could pledge to open source certain aspects of the design, the basic framework that allows for local manufacturing and maintenance. That's what my father always wanted, technology that empowers rather than exploits." "It would undercut your brother completely," Raymond said. "He wants to control the technology. We'd be giving it to the world." They worked through the night, drafting press statements, contacting key board members, and developing the framework for the Edward Chen Foundation. By dawn, they had a comprehensive strategy that honored both Edward Chen's legacy and Raymond's journey. 3 days later, they stood together at a hastily arranged press conference in Meridian's lobby. The entire R&D team, including a surprisingly supportive Derek, stood behind them with the solar generator prototype prominently displayed. 10 years ago, Victoria began addressing the assembled reporters. My father identified a young engineer with extraordinary talent. Circumstances prevented their collaboration then, but through an unlikely series of events, Raymond Martinez found his way to Meridian first as a member of our maintenance staff, and now as the lead innovator on our most important project in a decade. The story captured the media's imagination immediately. By that evening, it had gone viral. The janitor with hidden genius, the CEO who recognized his potential, the technology that could transform disaster relief efforts worldwide. James Chen's attempted corporate espionage became a footnote in a much more compelling narrative of redemption and second chances. The following week, as Raymond prepared for a rescheduled presentation to the Palmer Foundation, this time as part of the Edward Chen Foundation initiative rather than a competition entry, he received an unexpected visitor in his new office. "Mr. Martinez," Derek said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Do you have a moment?" Raymond gestured to the chair across from his desk. Of course. Derek sat, clearly uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology. I've been difficult since your promotion." "You had seniority," Raymond acknowledged. "It must have been frustrating." "It wasn't just that," Derek admitted. "My father worked with Edward Chen in the early days. They had a falling out. My father wanted to focus on profitable application, while Chen insisted on accessibility." He paused. "Sound familiar?" Raymond nodded, understanding dawning, like Victoria and James. "History repeating itself," Derek agreed. "I think I was trying to vindicate my father by undermining you. It was ... unprofessional." "And now?" Raymond asked. Derek straightened. "Now I'm asking to be part of the Edward Chen Foundation team. I believe in what we're building, what you're building, and I'd like to contribute." Raymond extended his hand. "Welcome aboard." As Derek left, Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Unexpected allies? Family legacies are complicated," Raymond replied with a smile. "Speaking of which, how is Mrs. Rodriguez doing?" Victoria's expression softened. "The rehabilitation center reports good progress. The private room and therapy sessions you arranged are making a difference." "What?" Victoria didn't mention was that she had personally established a care fund for Mrs. Rodriguez, ensuring the elderly woman would receive the best possible treatment for as long as necessary. It was a gesture Raymond had discovered only because Lily had inadvertently mentioned Miss Chun's special hospital helpers during a visit. "And the house adaptation?" Raymond asked. "On schedule. Contractors assure me the wheelchair ramps and safety modifications will be completed before she's released." They had decided that Mrs. Rodriguez would move into the spare bedroom of Raymond's new home once she was well enough to leave the rehabilitation center. The arrangement solved multiple problems, providing Mrs. Rodriguez with a safe environment and Lily with after-school supervision once Raymond's work schedule intensified with the foundation launch. "You've thought of everything," Raymond said, admiration evident in his voice. Victoria shrugged, uncomfortable with personal praise. "It's good strategy. Mrs. Rodriguez gets proper care, Lily has continuity, and you can focus on the foundation without worry." "Is that all it is?" "Strategy?" Raymond asked softly. Victoria hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "No, not all." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. They had been dancing around the growing personal dimension of their relationship for weeks, both too cautious to acknowledge it directly. Victoria broke the silence first. "The Palmer Foundation trustees are arriving at 7. Dinner at La Mer to discuss the initiative. I'll be ready," Raymond assured her. She turned to leave, then paused. "Bring Lily. They should meet the inspiration behind our adaptive tracking system." After Victoria left, Raymond sat quietly at his desk, marveling at how completely his life had transformed in just 3 months. From invisible night janitor to lead innovator and foundation partner, from struggling single father to secure provider with a growing support network for his daughter. All because he had accidentally broken an award and chosen to fix it instead of hiding his mistake. His gaze fell on the object now displayed prominently on his credenza, Victoria's Women in Technology Leadership Award. The hairline fracture in its crystal surface barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. She had given it to him on the day they announced the Edward Chen Foundation with a note that read simply, "Some things, once broken, can be rebuilt into something even stronger." Raymond touched the award gently, tracing the nearly invisible seam where he had meticulously joined the broken pieces. Like his own life fractured by circumstance, painstakingly reassembled through persistence and unexpected opportunity. That evening, as he watched Lily enthusiastically explaining her science fair project to the Palmer trustees while Victoria looked on with unmistakable affection, Raymond realized that the award had been just the beginning. What Victoria had discovered in his locker, those humble sketches born from an engineer's mind that refused to stop dreaming, had indeed changed everything. But the most significant change wasn't in his job title or bank account. It was in the reclamation of his potential. The fulfillment of a promise made by a dying innovator, and the unexpected connection forged between 3 souls: a brilliant CEO carrying her father's legacy, a former janitor with an engineer's heart, and a little girl who saw no contradiction in drawing solar panels and castles in the same picture. Some things, once broken, could indeed be rebuilt into something stronger and more beautiful than before.